What is going on, everybody? Very exciting day today, the moment that we've all been waiting for. This is probably going to be the most informative, probably the best YouTube video when it comes to building an Allison 1000. In this particular case, it's a 6-speed that we removed from a 2006 Chevrolet Duramax, and it's a 2500 HD 4-wheel drive. Now, you guys may have watched that previous video where Mark here at Kodiak Truck in North Prairie, Wisconsin, actually repaired my transmission. Now, I did have I believe it was a pump seal leak, so he went ahead and repaired that, and while he was in it, I went ahead and documented it while he was going further into the transmission and noticing that there was some other issues. So that video obviously got a lot of views, and we figured this would be a great opportunity to document, you know, this entire build. So Mark, we do appreciate you showing us that. Now Mark is going to go ahead and just take the lead on this entire video. I'm just going to record today, guys. So he's going to go ahead. He's the subject matter expert here. So what exactly are we doing today?
So basically, you're going to see that this is the finished product. You're going to watch the video and see we did this is our 750 horse build. We did a full teardown on this. We've got most everything documented on here. This is Alto G3 build. Really good clutches, LML pistons. We got our Transgo Jr Shift Kit. We've added a few more springs in the valve body. We're going to show you stuff that we do. We also we're going to run the Egr triple disc X converter in here. In my opinion, the best converter out there. And yeah, you guys are going to be able to see we did full seals, everything in here, and it's going to be a really nice unit for the customer.
I'm really excited. And if you as a viewer is watching this at home and you are actually doing a step-by-step on watching this video on how to actually repair your transmission, rebuild your transmission, I highly encourage that you watch this video from start to finish. You cannot miss a single step on this one. It's very crucial. So other than that, guys, I do appreciate your time. Stay tuned and enjoy.
All right, we're going to get our filter off. Should have a magnet underneath there as long as nobody ever threw it away. Which there it is. Got minimal metal debris on, nothing to get excited about. We're going to blow all the bolts out of the bell housing. We're going to take the cooler fittings out and get the bell housing basically stripped down so we can get it into the wash tank. Alright, we got all our bolts loose. These bolts look the same, they're not. All your interior bolts, everything on the interior, are all going to be bolts that got O-rings on. We're going to pull those O-rings off, throw them away, put new O-rings on. All the outer bolts, and we're going to hand these off to Jesse. He's going to start washing stuff and prepping right away for us. All the inner bolts, run with those, all the inner bolts, are the same except the two at the very bottom. You'll see there's a copper washer on these. This is LLY and newer style. This is a 6-speed. So those two are different. Now the rest of these that are in here, they're all the same bolt all the way through. We're going to get these bolts cleaned. We're going to make sure there's no oxidation in Wisconsin here. We got plenty of salt on the road in winter. You'll see all this oxidation. These things will be 100% cleaned up, ready to go back in because all this stuff is going to be torqued. Then we're going to have different bolts here in this corner. I keep these 4 together all the time so we don't mix them up. We got these 3 here. They're all the same bolt. They're actually the same as all the interior bolts without the copper washers on. And again, we'll clean these all up. You'll see when we put this all back together, everything will be clean and nice. Basically, I'm just now going to take a dead blow and just catch underneath here on some of these things real soft. Tap the bell housing. It's going to be loose. It's going to come up off the gasket. We'll pull this bell housing off and we're going to get Jesse to throw this in the hot tank. Alright, we're going to pull the bell housing off. We're going to get it in the hot tank. We're going to hand that to Jesse. He's going to get that going for us. We're going to run that through a cycle, get all the grease and debris off this. At this point, this is our stator assembly here. We're going to pull the gasket off this. Sometimes they stick and there's chunks left on there. This one, the gasket came off pretty much intact. But we're going to, obviously, when we get this knocked down, and we got a long ways to go on these things, we're going to check for every little piece of debris that can be on here. We do not get carried away with a whizzy wheel, grinding away or doing anything stupid like that. Take this stator assembly off. We're just going to put it in the tray for now. We're going to get to this later. We're going to keep breaking the trans down. This has got our pump and everything in here. Got our gasket on the back side. We'll take care of cleaning and prepping that all later. Now we're down to our C1, C2 clutch drum. We're going to go ahead and lift this whole assembly out. Got our bearing with it, which we're going to set on the side. We're going to replace all the bearings in this transmission, bushings, everything. Now we're down and dirty. If you look in here, we're right down to our C3 clutches. So we're going to remove that snap ring, get that out of there, and we're going to pull that whole clutch pack out of there and part of the planetaries. Get underneath there with a little hook tool. I tend to put a flat blade down in there and just leave it sit. And as you keep walking around here, working your way around with the pick tool, this thing will just come right out of here. Just keep working your way around, popping that snap ring out from underneath, and you're good to go. I set that up and take our top pressure plate out. What I do is I'm going to reach down, I'm going to remove basically almost everything right out of here. We're going to take it out, we're going to set it up on the bench, and we'll separate everything there. Here's our clutch pack. We can look at our clutches. We can see they caught some heat. We can see some hot spots in the metals, and the steels, and everything else. So this trans has been beat on a little bit. Pull all our gears off of here. Pull all this down. Everything's going to get washed and inspected. This is our thrust, which you'll see when we put this back together with the clutches that we're using. We're going to have a spacer in here also, which we'll explain more. So we're just going to keep stacking parts, keep yanking stuff apart, and we're going to have Jesse washing and prepping and everything for us. Got a return spring assembly, and now we can get to our apply piston right here. Our apply piston's out. Sit that with the clutches. This is basically it at this point. We're going to rotate this now and take the whole backside apart. These things can get plenty messy. That's why we got all our drip trays everywhere, and when we put this trans back together, we'll get the stand wiped down, the floor cleaned, everything. Everything's got to be perfectly clean when we go back together. Alright, we're going to take our big spanner nut off for next that holds our output shaft in place. Always make sure that the trans is still in park because you're going to need to bust that loose. The interesting thing is I've tore plenty of these Allisons down and then nuts as loose as what you just seen. And technically the torque on there is almost 100 foot-pounds. So, alright, there's our spanner nut. That's off. Now we're basically just going to blow all the bolts out that go around the whole rear extension housing. We got all our bolts out. They're all the same length. They're all the same bolt. So Jesse's going to clean them up. He's working right now. You can see in the background, I'm sure. He's working on that. We're going to pull our rear extension housing out. We're start pulling our clutch packs out. Sometimes these things get stuck a little bit, but we just finesse them, wiggle them. Now you want to be careful when you take this off. We just heard the thrust drop, which is okay. There's a thrust washer, and you can also see that the pin for our parking pole stuck in here, which is not a big deal. We're going to pull that out. Sometimes they're kind of suctioned in there a little bit. This pin goes in here, and you'll see when we assemble it. There's a spring also. You got to be careful with that. But we got that off. We got our apply piston is basically right into this back housing. We're going to set this off on the side for now. We're going to deal with that piece later. This is our thrust washer that goes in there. We'll put the nut back on this just to keep this assembly together for right now. Now we're going to go ahead, pull this pin, slide this out, get it off the spring. Sometimes can be a little bit of a fight, but not bad. I'm just at a bad angle here. I'm usually doing these from the other side. There we go, we're off. Now we're going to pull this piece out. That's all our parking mechanism right now. Get that off on the side. Now we're going to lift this planetary assembly out. We're going to have a bearing underneath here. Usually sticks to the planetary. We're going to get that, kick it on the side. Basically, we just keep those all. They do vary a few of the bearings in these transmissions throughout the years as far as size and whatnot. So I tend to just park everything off on the side so I can reference it quick and go to the back room and get the bearings we need. This is our return spring assembly for our C5 clutches. I'll pull our planetary sun gears out of here. Again, we're just setting everything on the side. We got a bearing underneath here. Set that off on the side. Again, I go in here, I just grab this drum. I'm not going to get all the clutches, but I'll get a good portion of them. grab this and pick it up. Go to the bench with it. We'll see too on these C5s when you get these out, if you guys look at these, and I'm going to show this to you, 95% of the time when you pull these out, and I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, I'm not sure the mileage on this truck, I know it's over 200,000, you'll still be able to see the part number inked on those clutches. This is the one clutch pack that in an average build never gets replaced. When you drop your truck into first gear out of park, this clutch pack applies. Sees very little wear. The only time this sees a lot of wear is if you do a big smoky burnout in first gear. You're putting an extreme amount of load on this clutch pack. But other than that, it's not bad. You can basically see everything on here, all the ink markings, everything, right from the factory with the part numbers. Pretty amazing. We've taken these transmissions apart with 400,000 or 500,000 on, and you still read the ink marks on them. So we're going to set that pack off on the side for now. Set our planetary off on the side. Now we're going to work, and we're going to pull our C4 clutches out, which is right here. This has a inner snap ring and an outer snap ring. On the earlier versions, that inner snap ring is a spiral lock, and it's really critical on the 5-speeds. And we'll grab one from the back room later and just show you that so you can see what I'm talking about. In case one of you guys do a 5-speed trans, it's similar to the 6-speed. And that way you guys can see the differences in it. But we're going to go ahead now, take our pick tools and pry tools and get these snap rings out of here. What I'll do is I'll get that, get my fingers under it, and just keep working it around. Our snap ring. Now we're going to go for our inner. If you look, there's going to be a split in it, which is right here. Here's the one end of it, the other end of it ended right there. This is 6-speed and up, runs this style snap ring. I'm going to pull that out, try to get underneath that with our hook tool lightly. I'll try to get my fingers on it. Yep, she went back in. Try her again. You get to the point where your hands are so full of transmission fluid on these that everything seems to be pretty slippery. We're underneath it. Now we're going to do the same process as we did with the other one. We're just going to work it around. Just keep working it and working it. Keep coming around. Right to the end here. Get in here, pop it out, and there we go. Now we can go in. We're going to grab our top pressure plate. Get that. Now we can grab our whole clutch pack assembly. Got our entire clutch pack here. These are C4s. And again, you look and you can see a lot of heat that got put into those clutches. Obviously, again, it's stock clutches. So they definitely caught some heat and some air. So we're going to go ahead and yank the apply piston out, which is sucked down in there. Turn that, let the fluid run off it a little bit into our catch pan. And now we're going to be ready to rotate the trans again, and we'll get the valve body out of this trans. We're going to roll the trans. Okay, we're going to pop our pan off here. Gasket came with it. Allison specs these gaskets as reusable. We kind of use our discretion, but quite honestly, 99.9% of the time it gets a new pan gasket, which ensures no leaks. This is our filter, and then when you pull the filter, the O-ring always sticks down in there. So I just put a flat plate in there and just carefully pry that out. You don't want to mar the case. Take the filter. We're just going to discard that. Get that out of here. Now if you look, we got electronics, lots of them. We've got 2 clips that hold this harness down into the valve body, which is a clip here and a clip here. So I'm going to go through and carefully remove all these and explain to these how we do them. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to just pop these clips right here. I use a small flat blade. Just come right in here and pop these. When we get to these style, there's a little tab, and I just come in here real carefully and push, but not too hard because you'll break it, and release it, and they'll pull right up and out. Again, you push that little tab into here, and they'll come right up and out. We got another one down here for another solenoid. We're going to pop that. Got another one here. Neutral safety switch right here. This one here. And then the last one here is our pressure manifold switch. Get underneath there carefully. Wiggle that one, and we're out. Now we're going to pull these 2 clips right here. Same thing. I just put my thumb over the top because these springs can, or these clips can go shooting up in the air. Pop that. Our whole harness is loose. We fold it out of the way. Put our clips back in to hold them solenoids in. And now we'll be ready to pull the rest of the valve body out. For our parking pole setup, Also holds our neutral safety switch in place. If you look, the pin that holds off the arm here. So we're going to blow these two out first. Got those out. We're going to take all these gold bolts out of here next for the solenoid. I'm not going to go through and explain what every one of these solenoids do, or this video will be a mile long. We get underneath here, pry up on this a little bit, loosen it up. We'll swing that tube out of the way. Next, we're gonna pull our pressure manifold switch in this tube. This tube actually is for reverse. So we're gonna loosen that. And you'll notice too, you got one gold bolt here on this pressure manifold switch. It always goes in this location. On 5 speeds, this tube is in a different location. You have the same bolt here that holds it, but there's a tab that comes off here and goes to that bolt hole also. So the gold bolt would go through the tab on the tube and the pressure manifold switch. Alright, there's our manifold switch. I'm going to take it dump the hardware. We always watch and inspect these two very closely. They have O-rings on here that seal onto the valve body. You always got to make sure there's no damage there, and you always got to look in here to make sure there's not debris. If there's debris or anything ugly, these get pitched. Again, this is one of these items that 9 times out of 10 we end up replacing. Unless we knock a trans down that's got really low miles and everything looks good, we'll run it over, but otherwise we'll replace it. It's not one of them items that you have to replace. If the transmission came in, it was properly shifting and working, and they just wanted a built trans, then you can use that over. We're going to get underneath here with a flat blade. Again, stay away from that surface area, because that's where we're sealing our O-ring on. Just give this a little wiggle, that'll come up and out. I'm going to leave these 3 in, I'm going to leave this one in, and if you look over here, I'm going to leave these 2 in also. They hold the valve body together. I don't want to split the valve body in the casing. Everything else is going to come out of here. Alright, we got everything out. We do leave this one in also with the bracket, because that holds the solenoid in, same here. So now all I'm going to do is there's a couple dowel pins that hold this in. I'm just going to grab the front of it. You can see it's loose. I'm going to pry underneath the back here a little bit, just wiggle it, and I'm going to come to this corner because this is where one of the dowels is. We're just going to work this thing and wiggle it. Just a little here, a little there, and the thing will pop up out of here. There we go, we're loose. Now you do got to unhook it down here, and that's for your park mechanism you'll see into your valve body. We're going to unhook that off there, and you see that pin. On the 6 speeds, all this will stay in here. It's impossible for it to fall out. On a 5 speed, that's not there, and it can fall out, and it's not a big deal. You can reinstall that later once you get done building the valve body, which this will be one of the last things I'm going to do. We always put the valve body in last. So we've got that assembly out. We're going to just work on getting our pan harness out quick. You're going to see that there's some fingers. Those we try to collapse. They can sometimes get caught with debris. We lightly work this back and forth real carefully, and we can get the whole harness right out. There's 4 fingers on this that hold it in. 2 here, 2 here. If they should break, I suggest you just buy a brand new pan harness. Pan harnesses are not that much money. We actually stock the pan harnesses for all the Allisons. So we've got that out. I'm going to set that off on the side. We're going to finish tearing the rest of this down, getting the rest of the boots out of here for the dipsticks and everything that plug this off, and we're going to go ahead and have Chessie wash this whole housing. Alright, we're going to get that main housing washed. We're going to get everything washed, and we're going to come back to you here, and we're going to show you all the parts, how we inspect them, what we do. We're going to finish getting our C2 clutch drum assembly, C1, C2 clutch drum down. We're going to do our stator assembly, and we're going to show you the valve body. So we got a lot of content here yet for you guys, so stay tuned. So our transmission case is all washed at this point. We hand wash every one of them. What we're going to do now is we're going to put our fixture on here, which you see, and we're going to bolt in with 2 PTO bolts, PTO cover bolts. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill a hole in here for the C3 oiler. We're going to then run the Egr covers, which has got a casting on the inside. We'll show you that curves and directs the fluid into that hole. We're going to increase the oiling to the C3. The C3s were the most starved clutch for fluid in these transmissions, and that's what we're going to do, is we're going to increase the oiling in there so that we don't have clutch failure. So we're going to go ahead and put this on. Basically all we do is do this finger tight. It's nothing that crazy. It's just going to hold the fixture in place. When you drill through, you want to be careful when you come through with your drill bit. You don't want to go like a maniac and just run that thing in there as hard as you can. So basically we're going to run this down through here. You'll be able to feel when it starts coming through now, and you're just going to want to inch that thing through lightly. Take this fixture back off, and you're going to see now, once we move these chips out of the way, there we are, there's our hole. I'm going to grab a cover and show you guys so you can see exactly what we got going on. So here's the cover for the passenger side. You can see the galley that's cast in there. This cover will go on. And when doing so, when the fluid comes around and spins with the C1, C2 clutch drum, it's going to take the fluid, throw it up against the cover, and it's going to direct it and drop it right into that hole. Really cool setup. There's a number of different C3 oilers on the market. This is the one that we use and we've had good luck with. All right, we're now doing the driver's side of the transmission. Same thing. We just use the opposite side of the jigger. We're going to run this down in. I'm through, and I'm just going to stick the drill bit down a little further so you guys can see, and you'll be able to see right where that drill bit comes down through into there, and it increases our oiling. All right, so we're going to grab our C1, C2 clutch drum.
Hey, Mark, do you need the milk crate to do that?
Oh no, that got retired. We don't need that no more. We got a new milk crate. It's right here. Here, you guys are gonna like this. So there's our new milk crate. Oh, somebody even got a milk mustache on there. All right, we'll set our drum assembly up here. Make sure we're locked in where we want to be. We'll start taking this apart. Basically, again, we just come in with a pick tool. We got to get in on that edge, put a little flat blade behind there, pop our snap ring. I'll pull our drum assembly out here, or our drive flange, and we'll get this out. It's a tight fit. One thing you guys do want to look at, and we'll address it right now, obviously this stuff needs to get all washed. When these transmissions start to get some high mileage on, or abuse or whatever, you have to look at these corners on each side real closely, because what will happen is this gear is so hard, and this is a stamped steel plate, it'll wear this out and it'll pick up slop in there, and you'll actually see wear marks in there, and you'll feel a burr up on the edge, and that's how you know it's wearing. Pull the C2 clutch hub out then, set that down. I have a bearing here which is going to get replaced. Our C1 clutch drum. Pull our bearing, and now we're just going to pull all our clutches right out of here. This is where, on the prior trans video that we did with Josh, you'll see that the drum was hurt internally. Again, that only happens from those black choline steels that are super hard. You're going to have a spiral lock on the top. You'll remove your spiral lock. And then you're going to have to get a pair of snap ring pliers and get down in there. And this one's a little tricky to get out sometimes. But you're going to get down in there, get that snap ring, walk it up, pop it out, and now we can pull that clutch assembly out. And again, we'll inspect all this stuff. Obviously, we're not using the clutches over. Now we're down to the point where we got our input shaft. We're going to grab this set of snap ring pliers. We're going to relieve this one. I like to drop it all the way, lift it up, and then get a firm bite on that snap ring. Out, and there we go. Not super high pressure. We're going to relieve the pressure off this so we can get the snap ring and get the rest of this drum assembly apart. Get this snap ring, get it up. These are really tricky to get out because they're so darn tight down in here. But we're going to get the little flat blade underneath there, lift, pull her up. You have to put the flat blade in there and just work it a little bit. There There we go. Alright, we're going to pull all this out of here. We're going to get everything down so we can replace every seal and everything in here internally. Now we got one snap ring left down in here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this and drain out as much fluid as I can. And we're going to get this last snap ring down in here. And when we relieve this one, she's going to pop up just a little bit. Right, we'll get this snap ring out. These can be a fight sometimes. They get down in there pretty snug. Sometimes you may even have to just go down in here with a small flat blade and just try to rearrange that snap ring here and move it. There we go, she popped. We're going to bring it up. Pull the whole drum assembly out. We'll split these two apart. There's another spring assembly in here. Pop this off. And now from here we're going to take each piece by piece, strip it down. We're going to go into the wash tank, wash everything. And then we got one last O-ring down in here that we're going to remove. We're going to go ahead and we're just going to remove all these. It's going to take a bit of time. We're going to remove all the seals and everything on the drums, inner, outer, everything else. Everything's going to be washed and prepped. And then we'll get everything ready to reassemble. We'll soak our new clutches. We'll check our clutch clearance. Install our new bearings, and we'll have this whole drum assembly ready to go back into the transmission. We're going to assemble a C1, C2 clutch drum. We've got our new seals on everything. We got our seal on here. We've even got our sealing rings on our input shaft and everything else. Now what I like to do is I like to lube all this stuff as we put it together. You never want to put a dry seal together. It's going to skid, possibly tear, rip, whatever. And I use what it's going to run in, which is transmission fluid. So we're going to lube everything up with trans fluid. We're going to suck all this stuff back down together. And you guys can just sit back and watch. There's probably no such thing as too much fluid down inside these. Got that down in. We're going to put our return spring assembly in there. This one here, we're going to need our spring tool to get this down in. This one can be a little bit tight to get down in. Now we're going to get that down, that piston down in there. We're going to drop the snap ring in. It's not going to set yet because we're going to have to suck that piston down further so we can get the snap ring to go. So we're just going to basically prep that and leave that sit there and put our spring compressor in here. And if you're doing one of these transmissions yourself, you're going to want to make sure everything is lined up to where you can get back to your snap ring again. Otherwise, if your tool's in the way, you're going to have to undo it and go back and start over. So we'll bring this up to the bottom of the drum here, snug it up, and then we'll wrench this down. And basically all we're doing is just compressing all the springs inside there. Alright, we feel it bottomed out. We'll take our snap ring now and drop it down in. Didn't give her a little poke and we heard her snap and set right in, so we're good to go. We'll back this off. Get the inside of the drums everywhere possible. This piece sometimes takes a little tap to get down in, or a little shove, but we'll get her down in there. Sometimes I just take the end of a dead blow and get her started. Give her a light tap. And there she goes. Alright, she's down and in. Drop our return spring assembly. Again, we're going to want to position our snap ring that we can get to it. What I use is just this isn't the C1 drum from this transmission, this is just an extra one. I'm going to drop this down in here. We'll put our spring compressor on there and suck that down. They don't make a lot of tooling for Allison 1000s that I've been able to find. We've got the basic stuff. A lot of the tooling, even in my industry and drivetrain stuff, you got to make your own. There's just nothing out there, especially when you're building one-off stuff. So you got to make your own slugs for seal driving and everything else. So basically they can buy this spring compressor at, I bought mine I think either through Jegs or Summit, but I believe it was Summit. So basically now we're just going to tighten this down and we're going to get that snap ring set. I'm going to feed this snap ring down and around, catch it underneath that lip, keep working it around, give it a little shot, and there we go. Now on this particular one, what I like to do, sometimes it goes further than the groove, so I like to double check and just get underneath this and just pull up on it and make sure that it's set and it's in the groove. So now we'll just back this off and we'll get our input shaft assembly in here, and we'll be able to start stacking clutches. On the input shaft, we got our new sealing rings. I like to put a little trans gel on them because when we slide the converter on, I don't want that converter going on dry over those, and trans fluid just really doesn't stay in place too well. So we're going to smear that through full with a little bit, and then we're going to put this shaft in the drum assembly. We're going to drop our snap ring back on. There we go. Now we're going to start stacking clutches. We're going to stack the C1s first, and we're going to get it all together. We're going to put a snap ring on this. We're not going to put the spiral lock on, just the basic snap ring, and we're going to take a measurement and see exactly where we're at. So we'll go ahead and start that right now. Always follow your instructions. If you're not getting a trans from us or somebody else, follow the instructions for the clutch clearance and the order of them stacking. We're putting these in dry right now. We are going to pull them back out once we get our clutch clearance and soak them in trans fluid. And then we generally let them soak for a half hour and then stick them back in the trans. We're going to drop our top plate on. We're going to set our snap ring in here. And we're going to check our clutch clearance. You got to make sure this one sets all the way down in. There, we're down in. Now, you're going to lift this plate up and slide the feeler gauges under. I have 86 thousandths right here. The spec is 85 to 95. I always like to run a little on the tighter side. We got perfect clutch clearance right here. In order to set the clutch clearance, you can either use a feeler gauge, or if you want to go through the effort, you can set up a dial indicator and move the plate up and down and do it that way. That's a lot of screwing around when you can simply achieve it this way. The main thing is just to make sure you pick up on that plate and then it's not cocked down on one side, because that's going to give you a bigger opening on this side. So what I do is I do cock it down, get the feeler gauge in, lift it back up firmly, and feel my feeler gauge and rock it side to side, and I'm good. So there's our clearance. We actually machine our own top plates because we found that we need to in some cases because the clearance is that much off, and we machine them ourselves. This particular one is a 420 thousandths. The kit came with a 450, but we're good to go here. So we're going to take this back apart, soak the clutches for a half hour. We're going to stick them back in here, and then we'll finish doing our C2s and dropping our drums in and our new bearings. Okay, we're going to start dropping our clutches in. The ones that, in this particular case with this clutches, the ones that go in first, the lining goes downward. These are the G3 Alto. These are really, really good clutches. We're going to have the lining facing down, and we're going to start with the external spline, and then we're going to alternate back and forth until we got all the clutches in there. You got clutch material on both sides. You just got to keep going back and forth from internal to external spline. And again, some of the clutch kits, depending upon what you use, may call for a different orientation as how they go in. Now we're going to drop our top plate on. We're going to drop our snap ring back on and set that. We're down in. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. You got to get as much oil off your hands as possible because we need to set the spiral lock in here. This is a spiral lock. When you look at these, you have to be very careful that these don't get twisted around because there's an offset in here. So you could physically get this thing spun around the other way and it'd be incorrect. And you're going to get a different clearance. And I'm going to just demonstrate that so you guys can see. Now if you look at the end of this, you'll see that this comes across and there's no spot for it to go up in. So this is totally backwards. Could it happen? Maybe, not likely, but we're going to bring it to your attention. So here we go, we got our spiral lock. We're going to get it down in one corner. We're going to work this around. And now we got to lift up on this whole clutch assembly. I grabbed the whole thing so we can get it to drop in. And if you've seen that, it just went in. And I always just check it with a little tiny flat blade. Just put some pressure on, make sure it's there. Then we're going to put our bearing in the center, which is right here. We've had that soaking in trans fluid. And now we're going to drop our drum on. You're going to turn these back and forth, and you're going to get the clutches to bite and drop. This may take a few minutes, and again, you try to get as much trans fluid back off you as possible because it's hard to grab this stuff, especially when you got trans fluid all over your hands. But you'll feel it hit right there, and it's all the way down in. Always make sure, too, your bearings are going the right direction. Now we're going to put this bearing in next. This is for the C2 clutch hub. This bearing, if you guys decide to build one of these transmissions on your own, I highly suggest you get one of their ATS catalog or something of that nature, so that you got reference points. This bearing goes face down just like that. Now we're going to drop our C2 clutch hub. I've already put a little trans gel on the thrust there to keep that in place, and just a little bit of lube on it. Some guys use a sleeved clutch hub or a billet one. In the horsepower specs that we've run up to, we build this particular trans is going to be a 750 horse. We don't have any need to sleeve this or put a billet in. We've never had one of these hubs explode. If we do a bigger build, then for sure we put that piece in that's full billet. So we got that in. Now we're going to soak our next clutches that got to go in there. So I'm going to let these soak for a half hour or so also, and then we'll come back to you and we're going to get these in. We got our bottom steel in. We're going to start dropping clutches, and we're going to alternate again. Clutch steel till we're all the way up to the top, and then we're going to take a measurement on this and see what we got for clearance. The tolerances are so tight, and you really got to be on it. Otherwise, you create a situation where you may have slippage or something else and cause the clutches to prematurely fail. What we're looking for on this is around 70 to 80 thousandths of clearance, and I measure these simply with my vernier like it's a depth gauge. I just catch the corner of where the top plate hits. Okay, we're going to come in and grab this lug right here and measure off the top of there. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to bump my vernier right onto there. We're going to take our measurement. We're looking for 70 to 80 thou. So we got our lug, we measured off our lug, we're parallel, and we're exactly at 80 thousandths of clearance. So we're good to go. We're going to end up putting our top plate on now, putting our snap ring on, and we'll be all set, ready to go, and we'll be ready to drop this assembly in the transmission. That's it. C1, C2 clutch drum assembly is ready to go in. Alright, we're going to work on our stator assembly next. We've already gone ahead. We've got our C3 clutches soaking right now in ATF, because when we're done with our stator, we'll drop our C3 clutches in. We're going to get those all, make sure they all shim out as far as the clearance goes. We'll drop our C1, C2 clutch drum in, then we'll drop our stator assembly, bell housing, we'll torque all the front side stuff. You can see there's still some gasket on here and everything else, so we go ahead, we're going to peel off all this gasket, we're going to make sure both sides of this plate is going to be cleaned down all the way for any little debris when we're all said and done. We're going to take this apart, we're going to go through the pump, we're going to look at that and check everything out on it. Pull our thrust out of here. We're going to do a bunch of mods to the stator assembly, and we'll walk you guys through it, what we do here. I'm sure there's a lot of different builders that do different things all different ways, and we'll show you what we do. We're going to take this plate at this time, we're just going to take it over, put it in the solvent tank for right now, let it soak for a few, and we're going to come back and clean this, but we'll get these other components apart here first. Alright, we're going to take this, we're going to get our converter flow valve out, which is right underneath here. We're going to go ahead and all we do is just take a small screwdriver, we're going to push in on this, take a magnet, pull the pin right out. It comes right out. Now we're going to reach in, I'm going to grab all this stuff out of here. And all this, what you see right here, we discard. Some builders will take these and grind flats on them and use them over. We just choose to use the converter flow valve. We'll put it in and make it all happen. Next, we're going to pull this apart so we can get to the regulator spring. We're going to increase pressure on that. So they make all different sorts of tools. I made my own. This seems to work pretty slick. We just basically run this in here. We're going to pull this out, pull our dowel out. I want to pull this all apart. There's a couple different ways to do this, and we've done both. You can change the actual regulator spring to a stiffer spring, or they do make shims for underneath there. We actually make our own shims for that with our CNC. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to strip the rest of this valve body, or this, not the valve body, we're the stator down. We'll strip the stator down. We're going to get the rest out of here. We're going to wash everything. One thing we're going to look for when we're inspecting this, and I'm going to try to make this real clear on the video now. This is a somewhat common issue if you're going to have one with this piece. These two oiling holes have to be at 6 and 12 o'clock. So when you look at your assembly here, here's the bottom of it, you got to make sure these are lined up. If this thing's cocked or twisted, you're definitely going to have oiling problems. Plus you're going to have problems internally here because the splines are tearing out of it. So we're going to go ahead, keep tearing this down. We are going to take the pump apart here, and it's still got quite a bit of oil in. We're going to inspect this plate once we wash it up for any galling, anything that doesn't look right. We're going to pull our gears out. These have a set mark on them. We're going to look very closely at these to make sure there's no cracks, there's no imperfections, no nothing. If you were to ever accidentally drop one of these on the ground, I would highly suggest you quit right there because they are fragile, and I would get a new pump. We're going to take this pump, we're going to drain it, we're going to pull the seal, we're going to pull the bushing out, we're going to put the outer seal from the bell housing out, we're going to wash this all up and get our new bushing, new seal in and everything, get our pump back together after we inspect it all, as long as it's good, and go from there. So for now, I'm going to set this over in the wash tank. We're going to wash this stuff up. We're going to pull this snap ring next, and we're going to get that so we can get the bearing out of there, and then we're going to flip this and take the apply piston out of the back. These can be pretty tough to get out at times, and sometimes you'll see here where the snap ring's stuck underneath there. So what I do is I just come in with the flat blade and give it a little twist, and I get her out. I tend to release these inside here so you don't end up wearing upside your head because there's a lot of pressure on that. We're going to flip this over. I'm going to try to pull this up a hair just by hand if I can. They're sucked down in there pretty tight. Sometimes a little tiny pocket screwdriver works the best. Yeah, I just usually catch this corner very carefully. Right, like that, it popped up. We'll pull this out. We're going to wash this. We're going to pull the seals all off here. I'm also going to pull this off, the gasket. And we're going to clean up this whole back half. And we're going to end up running this back piece through the hot tank. We're going to get the rest of the bearings out, and we'll be good to go. All right, our stator's ready to go back together. We got some of the pieces already back in place. We got our bushing back in, new bushing. We're going to drop our sealing rings on. We're going to get these down and on. These two are two different sizes. We'll drop it on in place. We'll get the outer on. We got that good to go. We're going to flip this, and we got 3 of them on the back side that we're putting on. And you want to make sure that when you do this, that they're lined up properly, that they don't get offset or something or another. We got it just right there. And what I do is I usually set one like at 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and I'll set one at 6 o'clock, just offset them. Not a lot of rhyme and reason. I just do it to keep them offset so that they're not all lined up, much like piston rings. So got that. We got our bearing in the back. We're going to get our converter flow valve in here. Ball goes in the converter valve first, then our spring. I'm going to install it in through here. Carefully, you don't want to push in that thing too hard that the spring or the ball would drop out. And we're going to put the end piece in there, and all I'm going to do is just take a flat blade screwdriver again, push that in here, drop our pin in, and we're good. I always like to go back and recheck everything, make sure that the spring and everything's working properly down inside there. Going to put our regulator back in here now. I'm going to use the same stock spring, or we're going to use our shim that we machine. We're going to put this back together. Now what we've done is, by putting that shim in there, we've increased the pressure on the spring, which is increasing our line pressure. We're down in. We'll take our dowel and we'll drop it right back in here. We're good to go. We've already got our pump ready to go. We've got our new seal in, our bushing, our exterior O-ring for on the bell housing. We're going to go ahead, we're going to get this assembly together, we're going to get the bolts back in it, the thrust on it, and torque it. You got to be real careful doing this when you put it down through so you don't catch a seal ring and break anything. I like to keep just 2 bolts handy here. Carefully bring this up. And again, a lot of rebuilders will possibly do stuff differently. This is my method of doing it. Is there a right or wrong? Probably not. As long as you get it back together and everything's torqued right, you're good to go. I'm going to put 2 bolts in here. We're going to start them. We're going to run the impact down very low because we're going to torque these. It's basically just to hold it together. Grab our torque wrench, which I already got set. I torque these at 20 foot-pounds. I go through them once, and then I go through them a second time just to double check everything on them. And there we have it. Put our thrust back in here. I'm going to take some trans gel. We use this here and there. I'm going to take a little bit of trans gel just to kind of smear that on there, basically to hold it in place, because when we assemble the trans, this is going to be facing straight down. I'm going to put a little bit on the bearing just to kind of lube it up a little bit. And I like to put just a little bit on the rings where the gap on them is. And then we'll smear a bunch of this stuff down with transmission fluid too when we go together. So, spin this around. Sliding the converter on when we get to that point too, that's another critical thing. You want to make sure we made our own set of dowel pins that thread into the converter, so that when we slide the converter into here, which is where it goes, your input shaft comes through here, that you don't damage any of these sealing rings. If you do, you're going to have a problem right out of the gate with the trans. It's not going to be correct. So we've lubed up the inside of our bore here on our transmission case, which we've thoroughly inspected this case for any cracks or anything that we could see, or any porosity holes or anything stupid. You also got to watch very closely at the finish on these cases. This is actually a machine finish in here, and it's coated so that the piston itself doesn't get tore up. So at any rate, we've lubed this with a bunch of trans fluid, smeared it around in here. We're now going to drop our apply piston in. The apply piston has a weep hole. That belongs at 12 o'clock. We're going to drop that in. We're going to push the piston down in. You heard it snap down in, and we're down in. Now we're going to drop in the retaining spring, the return spring assembly. That's going to sit down in. Now on this build, we have the black Colines with the G3 clutch material. The instructions call for the relief hole on these steels. One steel will have these relief cuts in it. And when you see those cuts, you got to be able to get one of those cuts at 12 o'clock, which is going to be right here. Here's our relief. We're going to drop this in because this is the top of the transmission. We're going to drop it down in, set down in. Now we're going to alternate our installation of our clutches, which are already oiled. We're going to drop a clutch and then a steel. You got to make sure that everything's lined up properly. You'll see the notches in the case. And again, we pre-oil all this stuff to make sure that there's plenty of transmission fluid on this. Our last clutch. Now we're going to drop our pressure plate down in. And then this will be the fun part, pressing that down. We got a lot of spring pressure on these LML builds. We're going to press that down, and we're going to get our snap ring set. Kind of get it in and under there, and I just work this around very slowly. And if you just keep pressing down with your thumb and everything, you'll get this to go. Keep moving it around, keep working the snap ring. Now we're over. Now I just give it a thump and get that snap ring to drop. I push it down a couple, 2-3 times. Our clearance we're looking for is 60 thousandths. We've got 60 thousandths on the feeler gauge. I'm going to run the feeler gauge between the bottom of the pressure plate and the clutches. That's exactly what we got, so we're good to go. We're going to go ahead now and we're going to drop in our C1, C2 clutch drum. So we're going to get that in. We're going to have to grab some gaskets and lay some gaskets down here and then drop in our stator assembly. Here's our bottom gasket. You're going to want to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. I get these as close as I can right out of the gate. Now we're going to drop our stator right on top of there, the whole assembly. These things are pretty heavy. You want to use 2 hands. You don't want this thing to slam down on there because you got sealing rings on the back side. And there we are, dropped right into place. We'll put our top gasket on. We're in place. And now we'll be able to drop our bell housing on, drop our bolts in, and torque everything. Basically, these bolts have O-rings. We took all the old O-rings off, and we have the new ones going on. These bolts are all the interior perimeter bolts. These are our 2 bottom bolts with the coppers on. And we got a couple oddball ones on the bell housing that we'll set out here. We'll be ready to go. Right, we're going to drop our bell housing on. I just put a light bead, very, very light bead of ATF inside there just so we lube when we go onto the O-ring. We're going to drop the bell housing down on. We're going to line that up with our holes inside here. Just kind of give this a light tap back and forth. We're down on. I like to go to the very outside bolts and get 2 of those in so that we know everything's aligned. Kind of give them a little wiggle. That all feels good there. And now we're just going to go and drop all our bolts back where they belong. We get to the interior bolts. Again, like I say, you got to pay attention what you're doing. The 2 coppers, they're going to end up at the very bottom. Our interior bolts, we've got all the way around the exterior of the perimeter. And then we're going to put all the bolts with the O-rings on the interior of the bell housing area. These are all the ones with the brand new O-rings. You're going to torque all the bolts in here. What I do is I go across 2 just to start with and then just start going around working all the outside ones. I'll go around this thing 1 complete time and then come back a 2nd time. Because obviously when you torque this bolt here, there's no pressure on the rest of them. And as you come around, you'll see when I torque it, they'll take just a little bit more torque. So we're going to go ahead right there. And now we'll just work our way all the way around. We're going to go ahead and get our 2 cooler fittings back in, which if you guys can tell, this truck already has the hydraulic lines for transmission cooler lines. So we're going to put these back in. We're going to snug these down. And then we're also going to go ahead and get our filter on and our magnet back. Many times I've taken these trannies apart, or even just ones we've serviced and the magnet's gone. A lot of times what will happen is the guy will unspin a filter off, not realize that the magnet's stuck, and he throws the filter away, puts a new one on, the magnet's gone. So here's our magnet. Put that on. We're just going to take a little dab of trans fluid on the gasket. We're going to spin this on, snug her down by hand real good. Well, we have not soaked our clutches yet. I'm basically just setting clutch clearance right now. If you look, I'll get down in here, we got a ton of clearance, way more than we're supposed to have. I got 60 thousandths on this feeler gauge, we got a mile in here. So what we have to do at this point is they give us selective thicknesses for the choline steels that separate these clutches. So we're gonna have to take this back apart, remove some steels, and keep adding to this to build this clutch pack back up closer to our pressure plate so that we get our proper clearance. So right now, the steels that came in the kit, I have all the thin ones in here because I'd rather go deeper to begin with and build it back up than have it too tight and not be able to get the snap ring on or super tight right out of the gate. So we're going to go ahead and take this back apart, and we're going to add a couple thicker steels in here and build this back up and take a new measurement and see where we're at. Alright guys, so we went in, I took this all back apart. We took 2 of the thinner steels out. My gut feeling said put 2 thicks in. We did. We needed to get to our 60 thousandths clearance, and we are spot on. So now we're going to take this back apart again, soak our clutches for a half hour. We got to get further down into the transmission, put some more parts in there, and we're going to get this whole thing assembled after we get our clutches soaked. We're going to drop our sun gear down inside the case here. We got to go way down in. And I just drop these in, I keep turning them, and they're going to grab the front C3 clutches as we go, and just keep turning and wiggling, and you'll feel this when it finally hits down on the back side. It gets tougher as you go, and right there we are. We hit right down on the bottom, so we're perfect. Now we're going to go in, we're going to drop our bearing in here, which you've already had soaking in ATF. We got that in. Now on this clutch kit, because we increased the clutch count, we're going to end up running this spacer also that came in the kit. So we're going to take that with our thrust. We'll put these together. We're going to drop them on here. And now the trick is to hold that all in place because it's got to drop down and in. And this is where our Transgel comes in pretty handy. So we're going to put Transgel on here on 4 sides. You'll see we'll smear that down in. This won't hurt anything with the clutches or whatever. This has got a low melting point. In fact, on a warm day, it's a lot softer than when you're doing this in wintertime in a cooler shop. But we're going to smear that down in there. That's going to hold it in place so we can turn this and drop it in and not fight with this thing. So that should be enough to hold it where we need to be. We're going to pick this up. We're going to carefully set this down in here, and I'm going to turn this and drop it in. Now the trick is to get all 4 gears lined up to drop. So we keep kind of playing with it a little bit, and all of a sudden she'll drop just like that. So we're good to go. We'll need another bearing down in there before we get too far. We'll drop that one into place. And now we're going to start stacking our clutches back in here, which we've had soaking here. And we're going to go back alternating our steels. And you guys can see how they really increased the clutch count on these from factory, which is a really cool deal because they'll take a lot more power. Now we're going to drop our back pressure plate in. At this point we'll put our small snap ring in first. These can be fun to get set because we got a lot of pressure on that return. So what I do is I get in here and I try to get one side down and caught. We're down and under there. Now I'm going to just work this thing all the way around and keep pushing down on it. And you can see we're down, but we're not in. So what I like to do is, this is a pretty heavy steel plate. We're in the groove, but we're not set back where this snap ring belongs because we have our outer snap ring that's going to lock it in. So all I do is come around, give this a light tap with the screwdriver, and if you watch over here, when I hit this, you'll see that the snap ring starts working its way out the case. Now that's all the way out and about. Now our opening on our snap ring is over in this area. I'm going to purposely offset this snap ring the other direction. And I try to shove them down in at an angle like that. And usually you can get them to go and drop real easy. And there she's down and in. Got our bearing already in place. We're going to drop our next planetary down in. And this is where we start trucking along pretty fast. That's down and in. We're going to drop our next bearing in. And I'll stop and say here too now, we've inspected all these planetaries, the gears, we've checked the clearances on them, we looked at the thrust, we did all that. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done on these. We couldn't document everything on this build, but we got the meat and potatoes of this. So we're going to keep rolling along. We're going to drop our shaft or intermediate shaft in. Start stacking the gears back in here. Got a spacer that goes in next. Another gear. And one more bearing. Alright, we're going to drop our C5 clutches back in. We got our bottom apply plate. And then we're just going to start stacking clutches again. These are all the stock clutches that were in this transmission. Rarely do you replace the C5s. They normally hold in there pretty good. If you had a higher horsepower application that was more than like a 750 horse build or something of that nature, then we would definitely look at replacing those also then with the high performance clutches. Put in our return spring assembly. That's got a tab that goes right to the bottom side of the case. We're going to drop our last planetary in here. Down and in. And take the nut back off, obviously we need to. We're going to take our trans at that time, make sure it's all the way up as if it were in park. Drop that back in. We'll put our parking pawl in, we're going to hook that in. Put our pin back down in. I always try to line this up too. It's not necessary, but when you get to torquing the nut on the back, you're going to want that where it's at. We got our new rear output bearing in place. We're going to now go in here with the snap ring. You got to watch this snap ring. The snap ring's got a bevel on the edge of it. I don't know if he's going to be able to zoom in with the camera and catch that close enough, but it's got a bevel down on it. The bevel side's always up. You can put this snap ring in backwards. So we're going to go ahead, drop that down in there and make sure it sets. There, we heard her drop in. What I like to do, right or wrong or indifferent, is I like to just take a flat blade then, just catch one of the holes, give it a light tap, and you can see the thing set a little deeper. Right there, and we're good to go. Let's spin it around. We're going to get the applied piston in the backside here. Again, we're going to use some ATF in here. We're going to lube this up. We got all our new O-rings on the other piece. This also is, we got to make sure that this ends up down in that cavity. That's where we got to line it up. So what we're going to do is make sure that this drops right into that cavity. So you got to kind of line it up. So what I do is I try to get it down in there and I try to drop that side first. Just right there where it's perfect. We dropped in, squeeze it down in, and there we are. Here we go with our extension housing. This also, got to make sure we line up. We're going to line up over here with the pin for the parking pawl. We drop down in, that's good. We're going to start all our bolts loose. Some of you guys probably have experienced or seen, and we've seen plenty through the shop here, where this tail housing will crack and break. 9 times out of 10 it's the result of a bad U-joint, bent drive shaft, something shaking in the drivetrain. Very difficult job to do in the truck as far as replacing this tail housing. And very critical because you can real easily drop a clutch out of place and cause issues. So when we do these, here you'll see that you've seen all the clutches that went in. When you have this thing in the truck, laying 45 degrees from this, it's real easy for the clutches to fall back out of that thing. We have done them in the truck. I've done them in the truck already. We have quite a way of doing it. We end up pulling the transfer case out of the truck, moving it back onto the ground, and we actually have a special slug that goes in the receiver hitch on these trucks, and we lift them about a good 6 feet in the air on the back so we can maintain all the clutches sliding forward. 9.9 times out of 10 we'll get it, and we have no problems. Every now and then we'll have one that'll fight us, and we'll end up having to pull a trans to get it done. We're going to go ahead now. I'm going to run a couple of these down by hand because you don't want to run them down with the impact, because that is spring loaded. And you want to make sure you draw that thing down real slowly and evenly. We're going to go ahead and torque these, and again on these, just like the bell housing, I'm going to run through them twice. So I'm going to start over here. I got that one snug. I'm going to go here, and now I'm going to work my way around 2 times. Alright, we're good to go there. Now we're just going to run our spanner nut down. We're going to torque it. The only thing with this is with the valve body out, you got to make sure that your transmission stays up in park. So I'm going to kind of hold that over there because you got to keep the planetary from spinning, otherwise it's all going to spin in a circle. Alright, we're right there. I'll keep the pressure on it. And there we are. This is the Allison socket for the 1 to 10 Allisons. For the spanner nut in the back. I also have the one for the 11 and up LML style trans, which is a bigger spanner socket because they run a bigger output shaft. So we've done a lot of 11 and up LML trans builds already also. Alright guys, now we're moving on to the valve body. Alright, what I do is I take a little small flat blade, there's a break right in here, I get there, and then I slide around to this backside, and kind of split it there, and try to get up into the middle. There's another dowel right up in here. Got it up right there. I also hold this top plate down here because if this comes off, the solenoids are going to come off, trim valves, and everything inside there is going to shoot out because everything's spring loaded. So, got that piece off. What I like to do is I just, for now until I strip it, I'm going to lay it back on the bench top and I just prop a socket down just to keep pressure on that plate so everything doesn't come apart. Here's our mid plate. This is going to get drilled for our shift kit. We're going to get a bucket and drain all the excess fluid out of here. Right here we have a little tiny filter that filters the fluid in the valve body, and we can always inspect those and look. See, that sometimes will dictate how much clutch material a transmission may have in it. So you pull that out, and we'll look at this closer, but all in all it looks pretty clean. This was a stock trans that really wasn't beat on all too bad. Clutches got a little hot, but I've had these already where you need a stock transmission and somebody's really roasted hard on it, and these things will be packed pretty full of clutch material. So we just kind of laid out the instructions here so you guys can take a look at it. I'm just going to grab a screwdriver here as a pointer. So if you look at this all, what's going to end up happening is both of these trim valves, one has a rib in it, one doesn't. Our trim valve with the rib right here is going to be on the outside edge of the valve body, and the other one's going to be on the other inside. So everything behind these pieces right now, what you see right here where it says reuse in the instructions, everything behind there we're going to discard. And then we're also going to take our center plate and we're going to drill 2 holes in it with the 1/8 inch drill bit that's provided there. We're going to pop a hole through there, and we're going to file that down, and we'll show that to you so that we flatten the surface back out so we don't have no burr from the drill bit or anything else. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull this plate off. Keep your fingers over the top of these two because they're going to want to pop up. See how that one just did it? No big deal. We're going to take that, set it down. I'm going to take this one, pop it out, set it down. Look at an angle a little bit, and I'm going to pull it up, and I got the spring and that. All these parts here so far we're going to save. I'm going to pull this out next, push these through, and we'll come out the front side. Okay, right there, there's the other one. Now we got the rest of the guts that are in here yet. I'm just going to take this and dump this and show you the pieces that we're going to discard. That's basically what we're pulling out. Those are the old valves. So we're going to finish stripping this valve body down. We'll wash everything up. We started taking our valve body apart. We're going to pull all these out. And again, we thoroughly clean everything. We're going to lay this all out here. There's another one. There's our spring. Take this side apart. Got that out. Now we got that all down. We're going to clean all these parts. We're going to come back to you and explain a few things here, a few modifications we make. We're going to pull a solenoid out yet, the shift solenoid. We're going to brake clean all this, get the rest of this strip. Here's our mid plate for our valve body. These are the 2 holes. I just took a marker and circled the 2 that we're going to drill and file down, just so that you guys could see it easier rather than me try to point to it. So we're going to go ahead and drill those, and then we'll file it off from both sides flat. Some guys will use a chamfer or just a hair bigger drill bit. That's also another option. You just want to make sure you do not enlarge in the hole any more than what that drill bit is. So we'll go ahead and drill these. I'm just going to take a file and knock the burr down on these, and then I'll show you my trick, what I like to do. Everybody's got different ideas, but I just like to have this as flat as possible. I like to take the drill bit then and run through the opposite side, and just make sure that if there was a metal chip or a burr, it's gone. And I'll go back and check this side. We're good to go. Now I'm just going to go and hit this with a little brake cleaner and blow it off for one final cleanup. Here's our factory spring it's the same spring in all of these. We run an upgraded spring, and basically it's a hair longer spring to put more pressure on it. I'm going to try to hold it there so the camera can see it, and you can see the difference in length. Our springs we run are just a hair longer. So they're an updated spring, they work well, and that's what we do. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to get rid of the old springs, and we're going to assemble this thing and put all the new springs back in it. This one here, we don't have an aluminum cup on the end, so I just take my flat blade, kind of push that down, finesse it around a little bit, Got her in, and every one of these too, I always go back and I just double check everything's moving slowly. Just take my screwdriver, put this one in next, grab another upgraded spring, shove that in, shove the aluminum cup back in there. Good to go there. Got our last one here, and there we are. Now we're going to take our filter, which is right here. This is a brand new one. We're going to drop that in the valve body, stick that down in. That'll be good there. We're going to take our mid plate that we've now drilled, set that on. We're going to be ready to go there. Now we're going to have to deal with the top half of our valve body. We're going to go ahead and reinstall our solenoids. This one's going to go back in with the spring. I'll feed it in here. Gotta kind of be careful doing this one. Sometimes I'll put a little Transgel on it, or I'll just turn it upside down. But what I'll do is I'll get it in there, I'll hold it with my flat blade, bring it back up, and then I just check to make sure everything's seated in place and that feels good. I'll bring this solenoid in, clip our bracket back on, put this in, and just put some light small pressure there just to hold it. We'll torque that once we get it all back together. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our valves in. So I've already got these bags cut open, so we're going to just dump the parts out. I'm going to try to lay them out here so you guys can see everything. We got 2 springs and a check ball, and this stuff here I definitely use the Transgel on. So what I'm going to do is take the smaller spring, put a little Transgel on, get that ball to stick on there, and literally shove it right inside there. Then I just take a little bit more Transgel, just put a light bit on there, put the spring on, and just enough to hold it in place. Now this one with the rib is on the outer edge of the valve body. So we're going to stick that in. Got that one in. Again, I just kind of check it with the flat blade. We're going to do the same thing with the other one. Just this one doesn't have the rib on. Take a little bit of this Transgel. Get that ball stuck on there. Get it positioned just right. We'll get it in there. Stick that in. Again, just a little bit to hold that spring so it doesn't move on me when I put it in. Slide that one up and in. We're good to go. I'm going to stand her up. Finally in our last steps here. We'll start dropping everything back in that we took out. We ran all this stuff through the tank. We washed it with mineral spirits, and then we also just took brake cleaner and brake cleaned everything. That one's down and in. Get this one down and in. Okay, both of them are in. Do not mix up your solenoids. They are different. We're going to put both of those in. I push them down, hold them in place. We'll put these accumulators back in. I'm going to put our plate over the top. Everything's in place there. Now all I'm going to do is just take this at this point and drop it right onto the other half of our valve body. You see our dowel right there. We're going to drop in. We're good there. And then we got one more on the opposite side. We're lined up, and I'm just going to snap it right together. Going to go put our valve body bolts back in. Try to catch this one right away because that's obviously holding all our springs and everything else in there. Get the rest of these in. Alright, there's our valve body. We're back together. We'll get our pan harness clean. We'll get our new O-ring on that, and we'll show you the install into the bottom of the trans. Alright, so we got our trans ready to go. I got the new O-ring on our pan harness. I took a little Transgel and just lubed the bore. We're going to slide this into place. You'll hear it clip just like that. Make sure that the fingers grab, all the fingers grab, that this doesn't come out. I've seen where guys do this. They put the harness in, they go to plug it in, and they end up pushing this right back into the transmission. So if you got one of them fingers that are broken, I highly recommend you replace it. So we're going to flip that harness out of the way. I'm going to shift the trans up to here so I can catch that pin. This is our selector pin that is going to go in the selector inside the transmission. We're going to line that up right into that groove. So we're going to spin the valve body. We can slide that up here so we can catch it. And we're going to make sure that catches, and then we'll just drop the valve body Not drop, but set. And it's in. So we're torquing everything here. I got a system I kind of go through on all these. I torque these at 9 foot-pounds. It does call for a Newton meter. We calculate it over, and that's about what it comes out at, is 9 foot-pounds. So we go through these. I do these, and then I get them all done, and I go back a second time and I double-check everything. I know to some of you guys, you might look at that and say, oh, why are you going it over 2 times, 3 times? Better safe than sorry. Make sure you got everything correct.
Can you do the 10?
I'm married to 10.
That was the cheesiest thing I ever heard.
So we're going to finish up hooking up our pan harness and finish up this trans at this point right now. We're going to pull these 2 retaining clips back out. We're going to drop our pan harness down where it belongs. We'll put our clips in. These clips are interchangeable from side to side, so are these 2 particular solenoids. We're in there. Now I'm just going to come along and I'm going to plug everything back in. I'm going to go down to the very bottom here, which is the toughest one to get down in your fingers at. And we're going to get this connection plugged in. That one's in. Come up to the top and we'll just go right across. Plug it in. I always double check it, kind of pull back on them. Usually you can hear them snap in. In. We're in. This is our neutral safety switch, which we're in. Pressure manifold switch over here. And our last solenoid. You also see that we put our bar in here for our detent for our shifting. It also keeps our neutral safety switch in position when we're shifting. If you guys want to watch how that works. As we're shifting the transmission, it's changing gears in the valve body, but our neutral safety doesn't move because the other side of that's held in place there. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put our filter on. I put a little lube on that O-ring, just trans gel, trans fluid, whatever you prefer. Line it up. I give it a thump with my hand, it's down in. We'll drop our pan gasket on. Drop our pan on. We're going to put our bolts in here. We're going to torque those at 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to pull this back out. We're going to put a new O-ring on that, and that's going to get torqued at 25.
Alright guys, so as you guys can see, this is the finished product. If you watched till the end of this video, God bless you. That's pretty awesome. I know it's a very long video, but very detailed and in-depth. And again, Mark, I do appreciate you allowing me to come here to the shop, bring the camera, and document this. And I hope you learned something. I really do. But yeah, overall, guys, it does come down to the builder now. If you're watching this video and you decide you want to take on this endeavor yourself, or you decide to pay a transmission shop to do this, it really does come down to the individual that's actually building it. And we can put some really amazing clutches and steels and whatever inside of the transmission. But at the end of the day, with 35 years of experience behind Mark's belt here, he really knows what he's doing. I highly encourage you guys to reach out to Mark here at Kodiak Truck in Wisconsin. And if you're out of the state or you're kind of far away, wouldn't be a bad idea to travel if you're really wanting something to be done the correct way. So again, Mark, thank you so much for allowing me to video this.
Hope you guys enjoy the video.
Awesome. But other than that, guys, I do appreciate your time as always. We'll see you on the next video. Take care. Yeah, so that was definitely a great video, I'd say so myself. That was pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that went good. What, was there food over there or something?
All I saw was a beard. That's all I saw.
Squirrel. Bring that trans back here. Where are you going with that? Open the door!